Continuing this series' expanded look at what the Age of the Ring mod provides in its factions, both those original to AOTR and expanded ones from vanilla ROTWK, it's worth noting up front again that these videos are not guides, merely faction highlights so you can see at a glance what some of the more interesting changes are, or all new features are. Needless to say, this is not an exhaustive demonstration or compendium of changes. Something important to note up front, though. In this series, sometimes you'll see oddities like abilities and powers instantly refreshing, or resource structures that produce insanely high resources. This is just a product of the mod's testing mode, which lets you change these values in-game for testing purposes, or demonstration purposes as in this series. So these changes should not be seen as accurately representing the mod and how it actually plays. One of the cardinal sins of both vanilla BFME2 and its expansion Rise of the Witch King was to shrink Rohan down from its own fully fledged faction in BFME1 and essentially make it more or less a sub-faction of Gondor. It doesn't even have a structure of its own. So one of the most impactful decisions made for the Age of the Ring mod was to return Rohan to its former glory as its own faction again, but this time greatly expanded. Before getting into the main stuff though, let's take a moment to appreciate some of the art, as Rohan has some of the richest designs of the game, which is saying something. With the fortress having some amazing wooden textures and engravings straight out of the films. You can see spearmen and archers placed in the towers, ever watchful. There's even horns used similar to that to Hornburg, just much smaller. At the workshop, you can see men talking and working away at the new siege weapons, covered later, even a new banner. The farms have farmhands feeding the chickens and pigs, and my favorite, at the mill, the fine, hard-working gentleman here dusting off his hands to get a breather before going right back to work. The well has a rich carved stone texture and great running water effects, and the arrow tower has men stationed within it and at its base, with arrows at the ready in a barrel and shields decorating it. And the richly ornamented banners of Rohan flow proudly in western winds. Compare these to Vanilla's one and only banner for Rohan troops. You can see some of the older yet unbowed men are used as certain kinds of cavalry, while the younger, more hale men are for others, covered later, many times with different faces for individuality, all having lifelike personality come through. And heavy armor upgrades are shown as either scale mail or chain mail. There are even better details like these later in the video. But let's get to the main stuff. Rohan, being the realm of the Horse Lords as one would expect, is centered on cavalry. In fact, it is second to none in this regard in this game, having more cavalry-centric heroes than any other faction and a wider variety of cavalry units to boot. And many of these units and heroes are designed to be used in conjunction with one another for special synergy stacks and complementarity of abilities, making this a more micro-heavy faction to play in many regards. In vanilla, the Rohirrim are a powerful Tier 2 cavalry force, able to toggle between bow and sword and have incredible stats and good speed, but no special shield upgrade as in BFME1. This is brought back in AOTR. You'll notice the stables can equip many cavalry units with a special shield upgrade, the likes of which is not available to any other faction in the game, and this is added to normal armor and weapons upgrades. As for the units, the Horsemen of the Mark are your basic Tier 1 cavalry unit and can upgrade their armor at level 3, but cannot get the Horseman Shields upgrade. But your Tier 2 cavalry open everything up, accessing the special upgrade. You have the Rohirric Archers, which provide high reward for those who know how to kite the enemy. The Rohirric Warriors and Riders of Snowbourn shake things up a good deal in terms of strategy though, as they're designed to be used together. Having higher stats than the Horsemen of the Mark, they can also equip the Horseman Shields upgrade. This can make them pretty tanky Tier 2 cavalry. What makes them special is their stance. While they lose 25% armor, the Crush Deceleration, which is just another name for Trample Deceleration covered earlier, is reduced quite a bit, meaning they can plow through enemy ranks with ease, even if the Rohirrim may take a bit more damage. The Riders of Snowbourn are shock cavalry, which have a unique ability in the game in which they use their lances to buff their damage by a truly massive 400% upon impact. The effect of impact is very subtle, so you kinda have to zoom in to see it. You can see pieces of the lances flying off everywhere. The effect lasts only for the first hit for every rider though, so you have to pull back and let the ability go into cooldown to do it again. By default, they do not trample infantry. Unless directly ordered to just move past the enemy, they will always stop and engage in melee when equipped with lances. It's important to note this ability does not trigger if you trample the enemy, only if you do melee, so it's usually best to do an attack move instead of just targeting manually. And the Thunderous Charge ability has a short cooldown which decreases the more your stable levels up, making these units perhaps the most dangerous cavalry in the game for this ability alone. Notice the sound and visual effect for the cooldown finishing. By the way, these units do not get heavy armor. You'll see why shortly. You can easily notice that infantry are not what they're strong against. Counter to how most cavalry work, using lances, you instead actually want to use them against other cavalry, heroes, and even monsters. Ordinarily, monsters like mountain trolls make very short work of cavalry with their knockback and splash damage, but not here. More on them taking on more advanced monsters later. And watch what just one of these battalions can do against a tanky hero like Lurtz. Normally he would wipe the floor with cavalry. As if this weren't enough, they can be equipped with great axes, another unique feature for cavalry, which makes them much better in melee combat, but at the cost of being able to trample. But it unlocks another stance, adding a great deal to their armor at the cost of speed, so it's best to be used right when engaging in melee. With any group of cavalry, you can manually stop and let them try to engage with infantry in melee mode, instead of always trampling. Obviously, this saves your cavalry from automatically running straight into the spears, but this is not foolproof. Many times you have to micromanage them quite a bit, or they eventually try to trample, to their detriment, and even fully upgraded ones don't last against pikes in melee, obviously. This is just a last-ditch effort to save cavalry, not a go-to. With the Riders of Snowbourn, however, this is exactly the opposite. And this is why they don't get equipped with heavy armor. Using the great axes and the weapons upgrade adding significantly to their damage, even these Tier 2 pikemen don't stand a chance. Whereas other cavalry, even fully upgraded ones, would not last. These are the only cavalry in the game capable of such power against pikemen. It comes at the cost of trampling and heavy armor, but is very much worth it. Can't do that in vanilla. And finally we have the Mounted Kingsguard, the personal bodyguards of King Theoden and his heirs. In consequently the most elite non-heroic unit for the faction, and thus being limited to 3. Coming automatically with heavy armor, their dual function as horse archers and melee cavalry make for devastating trampling and follow-up ranged attacks. More on these units a bit later. These units are very much like the Tier 2 Rohirrim units in vanilla, as you can see, but being so expensive and so limited, unlike their vanilla counterparts, these are really just meant to be near heroes, as you'll see later. They make up for this in much higher stats than the vanilla cavalry, of course, being Tier 3 units. But Rohan doesn't just have cavalry units. In vanilla Rise of the Witch King, their only other unit is the Spearmen. Covered in the section on Gondor a bit, these units provide an alternative to the slow-moving Gondor Tower Guards. Like in BFME1, they come complete with melee units and archers, but now also come with their own unique siege unit, the Rohirric Onager. These things can swap between normal rocks and flaming bales of hay, lighting up bases with fire damage. They're also a great way to quickly ignite flammable terrain, which will stay for a good while and spread. Great for support against clumps of units. The fire mechanic in BFME has always gone a bit under the radar, but AOTR completely overhauls it here. If you want to know more details, check out my series on it here. The archery range is pretty straightforward, training just 2 different kinds of archers. The Tier 1 Yeomen Archers have a special stance at level 2 which increases speed and damage, so they're a step above many other Tier 1 archers, helping them to escape from danger much better and pursue fleeing foes. And then there's the Halifirien Wardens. Protectors of the Hill of Halifirien, upon which were several beacons of Minas Tirith, lit whenever Gondor called for aid, these wardens are very much like Gondor's Rangers of Ithilien, stealthing in trees, having an arrow volley ability, and great pierce damage in long range, but no melee swap. Perfect for countering monsters especially, but they have low armor. These guys come automatically equipped with an upgraded arrow variant, so they already do great damage apart from their level 2 ability. While you're not restricted in any way to get these archers, as far as melee units go in the early game, unless you go straight for a level 2 barracks for the expense of Edoras Kingsguard, you're a bit restricted to peasants and basic spearmen for a while. Your other melee troops, the Westfolders, are locked behind a hero, Erkenbrand, which we'll cover later. The peasants, meanwhile, are recruited from your farms and are complemented by the basic spearmen. The peasants are also adopted back from BFME1 and work pretty much the same. Notice they get a horde bonus, like Mordor's basic orcs. Early game spam units, these are able to be upgraded, unlike many others in the mod. More on them in a bit. And the spearmen are basic as well, nothing special. The farms also buff out peasants, and this buff does stack with the traditional heroic statue buff, incentivizing early game peasant strategies. All in all, these are pretty good early game units to call to arms. Once unlocked, your Tier 2 Westfolders are Erkenbrand's men, known for being fast on foot, so come with a great speed and damage buff. The Edoras Kingsguard are Tier 2 Spearmen, but which can permanently change over to swords, some of the only units in the game to do so, which makes their unit debuff that much more deadly as they adapt. They can also buff out structure armor, which stacks with other sources, making them essential for defense of your base. And finally we come to the Helmingas, the heroic unit for the faction. These guys are incredibly tough on their own, able to tank damage and dole it out in spades. Able to switch between being mounted and on foot, they can adapt at a moment's notice to any situation, granting fear immunity to nearby troops and a powerful debuff, which can be stacked with the Edoras Kingsguard's debuff and other debuffs to turn enemies into butter. And they can grant a good 75% damage buff to allied units, though not heroes. But you typically want these guys near key heroes whenever possible, not only to tank damage for them, but to give a considerable edge to them over other heroes, or help take down key structures fast. But on their own or with the Edoras Kingsguard, they can dole it out considerably. The enemy consists of the Tier 3 legions of Morgul orcs, which have a passive debuff per hit, and come equipped with heavy armor, which melt most troops in the game.
The time has come.
Before moving on to the heroes, though, it's worth noting how Rohan's base works a bit. Their siege building has a special upgrade which grants a great armor buff to all of your structures, which can of course be stacked with the Edoras Kingsguard's armor buff, making Rohan bases some of the toughest nuts to crack. Furthermore, they have a unique structure, the Draft Tower, which reflects how their society works. Though far flung across many farms and villages, every village had peasants or trained warriors who would answer to the call to anywhere within the land, arriving in places within a few days at most thanks to swift errand riders bearing the call to arms. Limited to 4, draft towers can temporarily summon drafted or upgraded peasants, or permanently summon Westfolders, Halifirien Wardens, or Riders of Snowbourn within the vicinity of any other draft tower or fortress, thus supplementing your troops at a moment's notice with a wide variety of unit types to adapt to any situation immediately. Perfect for defending against small raids when you don't have time to get your troops there.
Places in the vanguard.
You can see that I can choose one draft tower way on the other side of the map and summon a unit near another tower. So if you have several of these and need heavier reinforcements, you can have 3 of the same or different troops summoned immediately to one tower in a flash. Draft towers have another unique function. They can open up opportunities to build walls around their vicinity instead of you being restricted to building only around the fortress. This is an amazing feature found nowhere else in the game in terms of structures, making each area feel like a little village to protect, bringing Middle-earth to life that much more. Rohan, like many factions in the mod, has 2 resource structures to accommodate different strategies. The farms, providing discounts to cavalry, and windmills, discounting infantry. Given how expensive cavalry are, you really shouldn't ignore utilizing windmills. By the way, it's worth noting how the upgrades come from your barracks, not a special forge building. This is different from most other factions in the mod which don't use armor upgrade buildings like in ROTWK, but rather like in BFME1, as resource structures. In other words, the more resources those upgrade buildings output, the more they gain experience, and the faster you can get your unit upgrades. But this makes those buildings key targets to take out. If you can destroy such a structure before it gets to those higher levels, that player has to rebuild it and start the process all over again, keeping him from ever getting unit upgrades if you're good. If he does level up enough to get the upgrades though, they'll always be available so long as he rebuilds it, even at level 1. The advantage Rohan has then is that it can more or less immediately access those upgrades at any time without the hassle of the long wait. The last aspect of the faction worth mentioning here, Rohan's economy plays like no other in the game, in which wells play a central role, increasing resource production of nearby farms in a wide radius. And to help with the peasant spam strategy, all unit production buildings automatically output a small amount of resources. Peasants can only be recruited from your farms if you switch their function, so those lost resources are partially made up for in your barracks, stables, and archery ranges resource output. This also means Rohan can by default recruit units further afield than most other factions, making it a versatile faction indeed. Now let's turn to the heroes. In vanilla, Rohan heroes are limited to Eowyn, Eomer, and Theoden, all as more early to mid-game heroes. In AOTR, you get these and more, including several from the books, and the pre-existing ones are very much overhauled. For starters, Merry is back from BFME1. This brave Brandybuck is still the scout hero of old, but now he gets the great touch from the books, his own blade from the Barrow Downs, used to deal the crippling wound to the Witch King. He also helps heroes to level up a little faster. Eowyn has gotten one of the biggest overhauls for any pre-existing character. Her lack of abilities as an early game hero in vanilla have mostly left her overlooked throughout any game I've ever seen or played.
I will look like one of the Rohirric.
In AOTR, while still an early game hero, she is virtually unrecognizable. Like in BFME1, the weak spam units of the peasants play a big part in Rohan's early game strategy, so she buffs them with her leadership, summoning permanent battalions all the whilst also having the capacity to heal with a unique land power of her own, keeping those peasants alive that much longer, but it easily being a power which lasts into the late game. And this is part of the genius of the overhaul of her character in AOTR. Eowyn has two variations now, both with high-level abilities, the White Lady and Durnhelm, the name she takes up in the books as one of the Rohirrim. Switching between these two affords wildly different strategies, making her one of the most multifaceted heroes of the game. Elfhelm, a Marshal of the Eastmark, is an early game hero you want for the whole match to always grant speed and permanent damage buffs. Mostly useful for the various archer units, he's vital in the late game for any strategy with the Riders of Snowbourn. Erkenbrand is the Lord of the Westfold, so naturally grants a strong leadership to the Westfolders, but he's a great counter to enemy cavalry, providing trample resistance, great counter to Mordor with his fear resistance, and can back up your army with reinforcements. Theodred, son of King Theoden, is something of a hero killer. Able to buff himself by quite a bit, even making himself invulnerable, he can also buff surrounding troops and various heroes. More on this in a bit. And if he dies, Grimbold defends the fallen prince, just like in the books. This is a temporary hero with very high armor, giving a welcome bit of reinforcement at a critical point.
You must keep this land safe.
Vanilla Eomer is an early game hero buffing only cavalry, has a spear throw ability to weaken especially enemy heroes, and can gain nearby allies' resources per kill. Great hero for boosting your eco. And his spear throw can be combined with Eowyn's for a great brother-sister combo. Brother of Eowyn, Eomer has similar abilities to his vanilla counterpart, but is now a late game hero with appropriately buffed stats. He also now grants trample deceleration, which stacks with other sources, making cavalry charges so much deadlier than in vanilla. His synergy will be covered shortly, and he can provide a great buff ring to allies, which is amazing for assaulting monsters and well-defended fortresses due to its knockback resistance. The trick with something like this against more advanced monsters like the attack trolls is to be an aggressive stance for the added 25% damage, so that way the trolls go down ASAP. Otherwise their splash damage will wreck the riders too much, even in hold ground stance with increased armor. Vanilla Theoden is more of an early game to mid game hero, buffing all troops, not just cavalry, granting great XP and a massive 300% armor buff to cavalry for extremely potent charges. Perfect when you need to break through impossible lines like this. But this is the limit of buffs inside just this faction, so you can't do better than this, relying on just attribute modifiers in just that faction. This is important to say given what you'll see in the Age of the Ring overhaul in a second, using the same scenario. but you can see that this is pretty incredible in and of itself. But even if the troops were ordered to stop and just engage in melee, it would barely change anything. So incredible ability, but clearly made for somewhat smaller armies. Now let's see what Age of the Ring does for the King of Rohan. Like Eomer, he is now appropriately a late game hero with way better stats but similar abilities, but he can now summon 2 battalions of Kingsguards, heal units and heroes, and summon Hama and Gamling to be covered in a second. Hama can be an absolute tank to absorb most damage for his king should you summon him within your base, and Gamling can make the king or anyone else that much tankier. Pikemen are obviously the ultimate antithesis of any and all cavalry, especially AOTR's Tier 2 Uruks from Isengard, but given AOTR's vastly overhauled attribute modifier system, with the proper hero stack like Theodred, Theoden, and Eomer, the boys are separated from the men. Watch as you can make one of the most epic moments of the films come to life. This time around, you'll notice most of the enemy is killed, even with this Theoden having a smaller armor buff for his glorious charge than Vanilla's, because Eomer and Theodred's buffs stack, testament to the power of the overhauled attribute modifier system of Age of the Ring. It's stacks like this which simply are not possible in Vanilla, the stuff legends are born from only in Age of the Ring. Rohan has one of the most impressive hero rosters in the game. For one, it has a great deal of synergy between them, where one can buff or heal another, and this hero buff stacks with the self buffs.
Rohan must not fail.
Furthermore, all but 2 are cavalry heroes, with more temporary heroes that some can summon. This makes for a very fast and nimble hero game strategy that is difficult to counter, needless to say.
Sons of Eomer, here for your service. Ride like Baber when the world was young.
Let's look at key spellbook powers for a moment. Reflecting a more cavalry-centric faction, Rohan has a 5 PP cavalry buff summon, the Lone Scout, buffing speed and damage, and which also doubles as a great way to scope out the Fog of War. This can be used to great effect when stacked with Elfhelm's speed buff or others.
Saruman's treachery will be answered. Come, ride with me.
AOTR's Rohan has adopted a great power from BFME1, the Draft. All peasants on the field of battle are permanently upgraded, which of course is added to normal upgrades, buffs, and leaderships. This is a central power for Rohan, just like in BFME1, keeping mere Tier 1 peasants relevant for a good while, but it's also central in that it can buff all Rohan units' armor as well. Rohan has a unique power, Muster the Rohirrim, an incredible way to gain you cavalry in a flash and surprise your enemy.
No foe shall conquer Edoras whilst we defend it.
The Pukel-man statue is a great nod to one of Tolkien's lesser-known writings about the magic of the strange statues of the ancient Woses or Pukel-men who once inhabited Rohan in ages past. Their last few descendants, the Druidine, came to live a secretive life in the Druidine forest on the borders of Rohan. Hunted nearly to extinction by this time, they aided King Theoden as the Rohirrim marched to Minas Tirith, buying them just enough time to save the city. These statues, limited to 2, can save your troops in a pinch by making them invulnerable, stealthing them, and guarding a target structure with 3 units of the Wild Druidine, a great way to incorporate these obscure people from the books. The statue also debuffs surrounding units, which can be stacked with the Edoras Kingsguard and Helmingas debuffs with great effect. The Oath of Kirion, a great nod to the books concerning the ancient oath Rohan's ancestors swore to Gondor to come to its aid in times of war, is not just another reinforcement summon due exclusively to Hirgon, who in the books delivers the legendary red arrow to Theoden, which was a symbolic gesture to answer the call to war. In-game, this works to reduce all cavalry recruitment times by 100%. The Great Boar of Everholt is based off a deep cut from the books, the prize of a great king and hunter of Rohan which took the man's life in the process. Appropriately, it has very high health, moves very fast, tramples infantry, debuffs, and attacks anything in sight, friend or foe. It also does really good structure damage, and its debuff stacks with other debuffs like from the Kingsguard and Helmingas. So drop it behind or within enemy ranks or bases to totally disrupt anything the enemy does while giving you a needed opportunity to regroup or pick off the enemy from afar. And when killed, the dead boar becomes a hunter's trophy, granting a great damage buff and fear resistance to you and your allies in the dead boar's vicinity, incentivizing you to stay close enough to the boar and its rampage to hunt it down at the end so you can keep pushing on the enemy. The hunt is on. And to cap it off, Rohan also has a version of Aragorn in the same 25 PP spellbook power slot as Gondor, known as Stormcrow, in which you can briefly summon Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli to turn the tide of the battle just as they did for the people of Rohan.
I shall put an end to this.
These powers are devastating as you can see here, but require some micro, which helps to even them out. High skill, high reward. And when all of Rohan's cavalry heroes are put together with the Stormcrow power, if you're fast at putting Gandalf and the 3 hunters on their steeds, this formidable mounted hero force will make short work of any enemy base. These temporary summons of the 3 hunters and the White Rider work just as well on foot, with Aragorn granting your army massive buffs to armor and damage while healing nearby heroes, Legolas dealing fast hero damage from afar, and Gandalf decreasing cooldown of hero abilities while stunning units. A highly unique and versatile power indeed. As you've seen in this episode, Rohan gets a ton of great stuff from the films and books both. Overall, lots of love for Rohan and Age of the Ring. Well, this about wraps up this episode. Next episode, we'll cover the incredibly overhauled faction of the Dwarves. There's so much ground to cover, in fact, it'll be one of the longest episodes of the series, so you don't want to miss it. In the meantime, if you haven't already, why not download this amazing mod? It's fast, free, and easy. Download link is in the description, and I have a great installation guide on my channel here.